to the Bayview Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? It's your host, Andrew Clark, and this week I am technically by myself when it comes to our host, because the regal and ever-present Pastor Chris Emery is not with me. Instead,
he's just over there.
He has left me with his two... He has given me his two sons, Brock and Garrett, and then my younger brother, Jerad. The three of them have joined me in the studio as we all have the distinct and honored privilege of being pastor's kids and growing up in the church. And a lot of, in some level, all four of us are now in ministry and all that. And so we just thought it'd be fun to take some time and I think break down what it all means, what it was like, some of the nuances, some of the maybe some of the special side and maybe some of the hard side, maybe even darker side, whatever it might be, the scale and spectrum of being a child of someone who grew up in ministry, whose family was involved in full-time ministry. And there's a lot to it. I don't think it made us, I'm not sitting here saying I think there was anything super special about it, like it made us better than others, but I think there's the classic stereotypes and there's a lot of stuff that comes with it. And so that's kind of the goal of this episode. And like I said, I'm joined by first Mr. Brock Emery. You work here at Bayview, but maybe say hi. Let us know a little bit about who the Brockster is.
Hi. No. No, my name is Brock. I am on staff here as the digital campus pastor, and my wife and I run our young adults groups, and then I clean toilets at the church on the side.
Nice.
Yeah, I got to get that income, baby. Usually I'm the one behind the computer producing the podcast, but feels a little weird being up here, a little nerve-wracking, trying to take up my dad's shoes. I should have taken down all the Alabama stuff behind me, and no. Yeah, man, pastor's kid, whole life, just kind of rocking that vibe, and excited to talk about it today.
Yeah. And then you are Chris's oldest, just to
luckily
clarify. Yeah, you are the oldest out of the Emery clan. And then to your left would be Mr. Garrett Emery. What's up, buddy?
Yeah, my name is Garrett. I'm the middle one. We have two younger twin sisters, and so that just kind of put me right in the middle of the kids, and so yeah, it's been fun being the middle child, being forgotten, and
we're just the best looking.
Best looking, the
funniest, smartest,
the best people in the world,
Yeah.
No, I'm kind of the unofficial intern to the youth group here with Andrew. He gave me the opportunity to do that this year, and so I do that around Bayview a lot. And that's what I've been focusing on this year. And outside of that, I work at a ski shop in downtown Traverse. So if you ever need some skis, come to Boyne Country Sports, and
quick plug.
I'll totally just give you a quick rundown. But if you ever need skis, hit me up.
Sweet.
But, yeah,
and you and then you are engaged.
I am engaged to a beautiful
road.
fiance who bailed on the podcast because she wanted it to be a surprise when it comes out on Spotify, YouTube, at Bayview Podcast.
Plug master, baby.
And then
he's on fire today.
I know, right?
I think on Apple iTunes as well, you can listen in. But if you want to see our beautiful faces, then YouTube is the way to go.
Okay.
We are working on Spotify video. That's a thing.
It is a thing.
It is.
We're working on it.
Those quick 5-second.
No. You can upload the entire podcast to Spotify now.
Oh,
science, the real thing.
Well,
science.
Sweet. And then to my right is one of my younger brothers,
just the only younger brother. No, I'm kidding.
But yeah, Jerad. What's up, dude?
What's up, dude? Excited to be here. I'm Jerad. I am in the same position of children like Garrett is. the second youngest, and then I have a sister and a brother below me. I assist Andrew and Garrett and Brock here in the youth ministry, and love doing that, and mainly in the high school area. And on the side, what I do to pay the bills is I am a sculptor and fabricator, which is just a fun way of saying I get paid to do arts and crafts for a living. So
with chainsaws.
chainsaws, saws, and things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Extreme arts and crafts.
And honestly, I'm just not surprised by any of that.
No,
It's all-
it makes sense.
it's
It
all
makes a
sense,
ton of sense.
all the sense in the world.
Yeah.
Well, sweet. So yeah, I think when we first started talking about doing an episode like this, again, there is something to the idea of I think going to church, attending church, but there's a different side of it when it's like it's kind of maybe you have to, like it's just that in that vein, especially as a child, like you're kind of just, I know as myself working here at a church, having 2 young kids, like they kind of just have to come with us. And then so I remember that as a child growing up, like having to go with my parents to the church. Like my dad worked here at Bayview, so I grew up across the parking lot in a parsonage, and like this was like a second home as a baby here. And then as we kind of progressed to some other churches, but there is something to that. So I guess my first question is, for you, Brock, what is like your earliest memories of, and any of you guys can really answer this, but we'll start with you, Brock, but just like earliest memories of growing up in the church, like being a child of a pastor in the church.
It's got to be those first years of probably VBS or whatever they did with kids who weren't old enough to be in VBS, but they still wanted them to feel included until the parents could get, I don't know, the free week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's why VBS existed, right? For the parents. No,
Yes, just a night off.
no, just kind of going around participating in those kind of church activities. Being at youth group in New York with my dad, where they were doing youth ministry there. So, man, I don't know. It's kind of early on. It's a blur because we moved around a lot when we were younger. So we went from New York, North Carolina, different churches there, Alabama, different churches there, and then to Michigan, different churches here. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. Garrett and I both just know what that's like. Just kind of moving around, never really sticking to one spot.
Sure.
So out of anything that sticks out, that's the thing. The rest of that, I don't know. Yeah, just living life in the church, and
Yeah.
church is at home with you. I don't know. It's all kind of a blur. I don't really know what details you want necessarily, but
No, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. Just you talk about moving a lot, and I think that's just like maybe a natural side of ministry of there's always the hope to be at a place long term and the longevity, but that doesn't always play out. I know for Jerad and I, our family, like it seemed like there was, I don't know, we moved 6 or 7 times, it felt like, before we finally got to a point where it's like, oh, this is just where we're going to be for a while.
Yeah.
And I think that's just something that kind of comes with the territory sometimes.
yeah.
Garrett, you being just a little bit younger, but still being in that same space of having to move a lot. Like, what was that like?
Moving around a lot. I mean, obviously, I was born in New York, and probably like 4 or 5 months after that, we moved to North Carolina. I mean, and then after that, probably another few months, we moved to Alabama. I mean, the earliest memory I have is Alabama. I mean, I don't remember anything from the 2 other places we lived before that. And I would say my earliest memory of the church would probably be VeggieTales.
Yeah,
For sure.
Oh,
I mean, when a question is asked like that, like the first thing that goes to my head is coffee, muffins, bagels, because our church in Alabama was located in a coffee shop.
Sure.
And so like every chance we got, we went with our dad, and he would give us free muffins, free bagels, and just watch VeggieTales, play GameCube on the huge screen, playing some Sonic. I mean, yeah, but like those are probably my earliest memories, and just seeing like just how that all worked out, especially being in a coffee shop, was like really interesting. But like
Sure.
yeah, but no, those are the few things that come to mind when I first just
Yeah.
yeah.
What are you, Jerad?
I think for me, my earliest memory, I was trying to think of, like, I was real little when we were here at Bayview, and I know you were really, really little too as well. And I remember being upstairs somewhere here, and I learned about this, like the little coins they use to buy like candy or like the Bible verses, slap on bracelets, whatever. And I'm like a 3-year-old or 4-year-old just like spawning into consciousness, being like, oh, money's important.
Taxes
And stuff like that. But I think my like vivid very first memory, we were at New Hope, and I remember Dad bringing me up on stage and like putting me up on the podium and wanting me to throw a candy bar into the crowd. And there's like 100 teenagers. In my mind, it was 100 teenagers, and he's like, throw it out of the crowd. And I remember giving it everything I had, and it went right into an empty chair. So, but I remember
Bunch of sad teenagers.
just a bunch of sad teenagers. Nobody decided to get it. No, I was kidding. But yeah, I think it was just spending every day, a lot of time. I remember Mom picking us up and taking us from youth group and things like that, or sitting in his office, playing the Taco Bell game that came. I don't know if you guys remember that, but Taco Bell used to give out like games or like computer games, and it was the BMX game or whatever it was on his computer a lot. So.
That's sweet.
I'm too young for
Yeah,
that.
I wasn't opened up to Taco Bell till I was like 20. So
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
me too.
Also, your bowels must be pristine.
yeah, something like that.
Sorry about that.
Taco Bell video game.
I think Jerad brings up a good point that I think also plays into the idea of being a pastor's kid and or just being part of a ministry family is the signing away the rights to your life not being private, but having to be ministry or message material.
100. Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%.
Every time.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just throw it out there, and one of you guys can answer, and you can all fill in this. But obviously, like I think as you hit your middle school and high school years, but for sure as your children, and I do it now even too. Like it's so hard to not throw a story of my kids in there as I'm running a message. But what is that like when it's like like you do something dumb, and I don't know about you guys, but it was like there was always that first thought of, how is my dad going to use this? Like how am I going to be used to make a point?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that would happen every now and then, of course. My dad actually found ways to incorporate stories that never happened
Oh yeah.
into a couple of his messages.
Yeah.
So he would use us.
He's behind the screen just
I know,
shaking
he's
his
like,
head right
no
now.
way. No, I'm about to call him out. No, the one that sticks out to me was he was figuratively saying, well, if my oldest son Brock, if he came to me and he was like 2 years old and he peed his pants, I'd be like, it's okay, buddy. It happens. It's okay. Like, no stress, whatever. It's fine. But if he's like 18 years old and he comes to me and he pees his pants, well, then it's a different story. And like he goes off on that whole tangent and rant, but he would specifically tell that story at youth camps that we would travel to. And everybody, because he would always wait till like middle end of the week so everybody knew who I was by then.
Yeah.
So everybody would slowly turn their heads towards me and be like, Brock, you peed your pants when you were 18? I'm like, I'm not even 18 yet. It didn't happen, guys. I promise.
Like, I'm 12.
But then every time he tells a story, I'd tell my dad, I was like, hey, you told that story. He's like, no, I didn't. What are you talking about?
Right.
So just denial. That's great.
Oh, I have too many of these. I think, well, one thing is I was never, I don't know if you guys were ever warned that like, hey, I'm going to share a story about you this morning.
Almost never.
No.
Yeah.
No, never. I think one of my, like just one of the, I think just building on my consciousness as I was growing, one of the things that affected me the most was during a church picnic, or picnic on the property is what we called it. And it was like a big tent. There's 1,000 people in the tent, whatever. And he's on stage and he shares a story about me pooping in a bathtub at a very young age of like, I was a baby, right?
So
and
like when it would happen.
Yeah, when it would happen, it makes sense. But then you realize, oh, there's hundreds of people sitting behind me because I'm sitting in the front row. And then there's just story after story of embarrassing things in my life that he would use for material. And they were great and they were hilarious. But I think self-confidence issues kind of go out the window when several thousand people know that you've pooped in a bathtub, you know? Like you just stop kind of caring what people think about you. So,
Sure.
100%.
Man, my favorite one that comes to mind first was, and I remember this memory so vividly, and like to this day when he tells the story, I like gets me flashbacks. I'm like, yep, I remember that exact moment, how I felt. He uses the story of one day when I was in probably 2nd or 1st grade, I did something really bad to the point where he needed to spank me, just the casual parent beating his kid.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
No,
Guys, it's not that bad.
No. But he uses his belt, and I just needed to be punished because I did something really bad. I can't remember what it was, but what had happened was he had spanked me, and I had turned my entire body and laid on the bed that I was on, and like just laid my face and just face planted for like a solid minute. And my dad always tells the story of like in his mind he's like, oh, I hit him way too hard. Or I like hit him way too hard. But what's really happening is I am like dying laughing in the pillow, and he turns me around and just sees me just laughing. And like I think that's the story he tells the most of me is that one. And
yeah,
it's just crazy.
Yeah, which is all good classic stuff. And I think that's like, I guess I don't have a ton of memories of him using stories of me now.
He was just perfect as a kid. So
I think I just killed it as a kid. But yeah. I do know like that's not the case. But I think, Jerad, you said it where it's like some of that self-confidence, some of that like, especially you hit middle school, high school, like all that, like, I don't know, like I don't want to like push it too far, but there is that reality of like, it's getting the point across. Like that's almost, I think, the acceptance that I had to come to in middle school, high school. Of like, my dad is not telling this story to like make fun of or belittle, but what he's doing is he's helping make a further point in his message to get the point he's trying to make across. And I think that 100%. Was, even though it was still that space of like, oh man, that's embarrassing. Like, oh man, like that's like, that just is what it is. And it's always like the old people or someone coming up and after and being like, oh, that, all the kids thinking, wow, Brock, you peed your pants at 18. Like just some of that stuff. Like there's always that involved. But I do know that my father never did that from a place of like, oh, I'm gonna get him. Like you know what I'm saying? Like I think that was. I don't think I realized that though till I was closer to that high school age, a little bit older, and it was like more like I'm actually sitting there on a Sunday morning being like, oh wow, like I can see what he's trying to do. I can see why that story now makes sense.
Yeah. I think the thing that I struggled with the most was like, especially in like middle school and moving into high school, just because I was the more rebellious one in our family, and so I was a lot of the rebellious. I did a lot of the rebellious things, and for reasons and things like that, and so I felt like that a lot of what I did was sermon material, right? Like stories were being used, kind of a thing, and I wasn't necessarily like I was like mad at him, but I felt like I had lost a little bit of privacy. I never like resented him for that, but it was just like, oh, well, anything that I do or make a mistake could be used as sermon material, right? And I think that kind of affected me as I was like in junior high, because in junior high you're like becoming your own person, right? You're starting that whole like, oh no, I'm me, this is who I am kind of a thing, and like trying to figure out who you are. And when you lose that sense of privacy or the ability to make a mistake and that stays private, or to do something embarrassing and that stays private, it's a safe space, but when all of a sudden a whole bunch of people now know it and I'm in the crowd, it kind of is like, it kind of hits you harder. And then as you grow up and you, like Andrew said, you kind of have that moment of, oh, he's not doing this to make fun of me. This is for the betterment of people around me. And it kind of, there's a little bit of a guilt there of like, oh, I was really angry about this. But at the same time, it's like, this is being used for the kingdom of God. And so there's like that switch that takes place. So I agree.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And that totally makes sense. For me, it was a little bit different because I never really viewed those stories as ever really a bad thing.
Right.
Luckily, I mean, my parents were very good about it. My dad would always ask me, he's like, hey, I hope that didn't bother you. Like, if it did, I'll never tell that story again. Like, he was very good about that.
After the damage is done.
After the forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah. No, my dad never asked. He's like, yeah, sorry about it, dude.
Suck it up.
Yeah.
Get ready for the next.
But
Exactly.
I always actually kind of like the attention. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was I'm already a pastor's kid. I'm already a little bit on the
Right.
pedestal. Not really a moral pedestal. I mean, yeah, a little bit. But like
Right.
oh, you go to a camp, everybody knows who you are. Oh, your
Sure.
dad's a pastor of a church, everybody knows who you are. I didn't mind the attention so much. For me, it was more so I just didn't want people to think I was somebody I wasn't.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we all hear the horror stories of like the super rebellious pastor's kids. Like there's a TV show about it. Like good
Yeah.
gosh, like it's a very real thing
Yeah.
in the world. I definitely wasn't a rebellious. I mean, sure, I had my fair share of things that I hid from my parents, but like it was none of that. For me, it was just I just want to be somebody that people don't think I am
Yeah.
from the outside.
Yeah.
So
That speaks directly to the stereotypes. Like
Oh,
that's
100%.
that is
Yeah,
like the
right.
classic pastor's kid stereotype. Is like we always joke is like I'm either like Bible thumping people over the head, like you
Yeah.
know, came out the womb singing Amazing Grace, like in the church 8 days a week. Like it's just like the classic. Like that's one side, and the other side is like, or I have to be like a drug dealer, and I'm going to end up in prison. Like
Right.
that. Like it always seems like there's just like
Right.
this stereotype of pastor's kids. So I totally hear you on that thought process of like, okay, this is a true story, or this is what it is, but like I really hope people would still take the chance to get to know me.
100%.
Yeah.
Because the biggest thing is I don't want to be identified as my son's child.
Mm.
I want to be identified as me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with me being my dad being who he is. Like I loved being my dad's son. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But being my own person was something that I think was unconsciously more important to me.
Yeah.
So
Dude, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I grew up so you obviously grew up in the shadow of your dad, of this amazing pastor, and then I grew up in the shadow of Andrew, who's also this amazing pastor. And I think there's that expectation that people have of you, and it's like, oh, I expect that people expect, oh, you're going to do ministry, right? Or you're going into pastor ministry, right? And I think that is like it's very. It can go one of two ways, right? Where like one, you're okay with it, or two, it's like, hey, no, I'm my own person, and people, or how I want to say this, like I'm my own person, and I have my own wants and interests, kind of a thing. And if it does include ministry, which it did, praise the Lord, right? And if it doesn't, praise the Lord. I think, yeah, like I mean, for my life, it was Andrew was this awesome basketball star in high school and middle school, kind of a thing, and then awesome pastor and things like that. And they're like, oh, you're like Andrew's little brother. I mean, I went to college, and people were like, oh, you're Clark's little brother.
Same thing.
They called me Little Clark. So, like, you kind of live in that shadow a little bit, and you're like, I want people to see me for me. So people were like, oh, you're going to do basketball. Like, no, I like to draw. You know? No, I do arts and crafts for a living. But yeah, so it's that fight of I want to be seen for me. And I think that's why I rebelled a little bit. And I didn't do anything like crazy. I did some really stupid things, but never sold drugs, so we're good there, kind of a thing.
never said he didn't buy him. No, I'm joking.
Kidding, but I think it was like I want to be seen as me, kind of a thing, and I want to have my own identity outside of that, and and I think what really changed that was like realizing that my walk is my own. Like my walk with Christ is my own. It doesn't depend on my Father. What depends on is like my relationship with my Heavenly Father. So
Would that process look like for you? Kind of, just for an honest example, like I had to like sit my dad down and basically like have a one-sided yelling match. Like we're basically like when I was like 15, 16 years old, like I asked my youth pastor if like, hey, I don't want my dad at any event. I don't want him at I don't want him speaking at things. I don't want him showing up to things, because I was so in that mindset of like, I'm my own person. Like I'm Andrew, not John's son, blah, blah, blah. And we were at this like retreat, and he walked in, and I remember just being like fiery, like mad
rage monster.
Like I was just like, why is he here? And it literally, like at the end of the night, I like pulled him aside, because he like walked up and he was like, what up? And like, was playing all cool, and I like pulled him aside. I was like, what are you doing here? Like freaked out, and basically had to we sat down, and I remember having this, I'd say one-sided yelling match, because I'm like yelling, like openly just being like, I want to do this. I feel like I'm supposed to do this. I don't want to be this. I want to be Andrew. Like, was just very like, and he like sat there and like smiled, and, like nodded his head, and I'm like, what a jerk. Like, what is he?
That's what punch
Why is
in the
he
face.
like, what a tool. He has such a punchable face right now. Like, what's going on? And then, but then he said, he's like, I want that for you. I want you to be your own person. He's like, you can do whatever you feel like you're supposed to do. Like, I'm gonna love you. Like, and it was such like a freeing like moment that I do wonder for a lot of pastors' children, not just boys but daughters and even maybe family members. Like, there is that pressure that's there, right? There is the pressure of like all eyes on me, like even if it's a subconscious thing. And a lot of times, like, I don't think if we've taken that step to basically what Jerad said of like, first and foremost, owning your relationship with Christ, where like it really is your, like, we always use the example of, it's like with students, like it's not this triangle style relationship where like, well, because my parents know Christ, I know Christ, or because they go to church, I must be good. It's a direct, it's a direct vertical line between you and him. I think that can happen with when your parents or your father's in ministry, like where it's almost like, well, they know, like they know Jesus, so I'm good. And it's like that breaking of that mindset, the fourth wall of just like stepping into, no, it's me and God.
Yeah.
So I don't know, for you guys, like, did you have that opportunity to talk to your dad, or what does that process look like?
Well, for me, growing up, I was kind of the opposite. I wasn't like, I didn't get the idea of being with my dad for youth events and like camps and stuff was like pretty much like what I lived for when I would go to camps. It's like, oh, I want to be seen with him. Like, he's leading this camp. Like, I want to be like around him as he does this stuff. And like, as he's talking to people, like I want to be right there next to him kind of deal. The more problem I had was, and it's really dawned on me only a few years ago or a couple of years ago, for backstory. I'm studying to be a pastor, trying to get my degree, trying to accomplish that, and eventually in a few years lead my own church. And I felt called to that in high school, felt called to that pretty strongly for a while, and then finally told my dad that was the plan. But when I tell people that, oh, hey, my dad's a pastor and his dad's a pastor, and like, I'm planning on being a pastor, one person that kind of brought that question to me was my fiance's grandfather. He had asked me, like, did you feel pressure to become a pastor, like a minister? Like, did you feel pressure? I'm like, and I answered yes, but I like after like that conversation, because he just said, oh, you shouldn't feel pressure, you should be able to do your own thing. Like, after I left the area and just kind of thought about it more, it's just like I never felt pressure from my dad to do that. Like, growing up, I loved being around the stuff that he did. Like, I felt called to by God to like share his word. Like, this is what I felt called to do. Like, I can't imagine myself being anything else in life but, helping, just spread his word and just leading a church, so, I've never felt the need of like being my own person, but just felt my need of like, just understanding that there is no pressure. This is what God has for me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's a really important distinguish that I've come to learn over the years too, is because like I'm the oldest. Like, so for me, like, when Garrett was really young, because I'm 3.5 years older than him. So for me, like, I did feel that pressure early on. I kind of felt that pressure for a long time. It was like, man, my dad's the oldest, he was the pastor. My grandpa's the oldest, he's the pastor. My great grandpa's the pastor, he was the oldest. Whatever, like, you go as far back as you can. I don't know. But I was like, guys, I don't want to be a pastor. Yeah. I don't think God is calling me to be a speaking pastor either. I mean, right now my job title is I'm labeled a pastor, but I don't get on stage and speak, and that, like, I'm good with that. That's what God wants me to do. But like Garrett's kind of saying, like, we're still here to do God's calling.
Right.
We're pastors' kids. Okay. We all have that stuck to our identity for the rest of our lives. Like, for anybody who will ever learn that about us, they're always going to know that about us. Yeah. While we have a head start, potentially in our Bible knowledge, our faith journey is the same.
Yeah, that's a good point.
My testimony might not be as crazy as some people's. And early on, I thought that was a problem. Early on, I was like,
that's true.
Man, all these other people at camp are sharing the testimonies, and it's really cool. They went through all these drug addictions and stuff. I'm like, man, I wish I had something to cling to. And everybody was like, No, dude, you're crazy. Like, be content and be
Right.
happy that you didn't have to go through any of that type of
Right.
thing. And through all of that, it was like, yeah, you know what? My faith journey is my own.
Yeah.
My working life journey in ministry is my own.
Right.
And I don't need to identify with anything for that.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I think, man, I think about that process of like making my faith my own. I didn't really do that until I hit college.
Mm-hmm.
It was like my second year of college. I remember during that time of going to my freshman year of college, and I was so fed up with being known as, my whole life up to that point was being known as Pastor John's son. Oh, I'm Pastor John's son, Jerad, kind of a thing. Or that's.
And that was a big, not to cut you off, but that was a big struggle, I think,
That
for
was
you.
a massive struggle.
And it was like the balance of, like, there was like good that came with throwing out that title.
Yeah.
And then there was also like just the struggle of throwing out that title. It was,
Yeah.
You felt like you walked in the building, and because I felt the same way. It was like,
Right.
I'm Pastor John's son, and like I felt like I could do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
Yeah. Anyways.
And so no, I was just so fed up with Dad, and like I had this like never had the yelling match with Dad or anything like that, but I just wanted to get away. I wanted to get away from that. So during my freshman year of college, I didn't talk to my dad unless like something crazy came up for almost a year.
Or needed money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Valid.
Like I need gas money kind of a thing. But I never talked to my dad for like a year. It just was like I didn't want anything to do with him. I go home for vacation and talk to my friends from college or whatever, and barely talk to him. And then I got kicked out of college. It's crazy. If you don't go to class, they kick you out.
Yeah.
So I got kicked out of college and came home, and I've never seen my dad more disappointed, and that had that whole falling out, and I think that made things a little worse between us. And over that year of being at home, I still don't think I talked to him. Like I think I was like, man, I don't know. Like I was spending all this time with this girlfriend at the time, and was either working, cleaning toilets and mowing the lawn at the church, or spending time with this girlfriend. And then it came time for the school year to happen again, and I was able to reapply and appeal the being kicked out and being able to go back to college. And in my mind, I was like, I don't need to do that. I can do this, that, and the other thing, right? Anything but that. And I remember the first time I actually feel like I had a conversation where I felt very seen. We were sitting in the back deck, and he was like, so you're going to go back to college? And I told him I don't think I'm going to. And he said, okay, tell me why. And I began to break down. I have this job I'm going to get this other job. Things with this girlfriend are going great, kind of a thing. I'm like 19. And
You're old enough. It's fine.
Yeah. And had this conversation. I remember watching him break down, like watching my dad cry. And he's like, hey, whatever you want to do, you can do, as long as you know that I love you and I see you. And I don't want you to miss out on this opportunity that you have to go back to college. And I was like, it was like a gut punch. And it was like, we began to just air everything out. It was like this hour, 2 hour, 3, almost 3 hour long conversation. Me and my dad in the back deck of like, hey, my majority of my childhood, I was known as your son. And I don't mind that now. And we had that conversation and began to air things out and began to really talk things out. And there was like a lot of apologies of like, hey, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you needed to live up to this or live up to your brother or it had to be this. And it was just this really cool conversation. And by the end of it, I was like, I need to go back to school. Like, I want to go back to school because I love doing ministry. My call is to spread God's word. And I'm a massive believer, and I love youth ministry. And having the opportunity to be here is awesome. And so I think I feel like I had something to prove to myself at that point. It was like, okay, like we're going to make a change. And I felt like that was the switch that flipped in my life of, no, he sees me for me. He doesn't see me as just his son. He sees me. And then I was like, oh, that's how the Heavenly Father is he sees me. He doesn't see me as Pastor John's son. Like God sees me for me. And I think that was like just a really cool like switch that flipped, and then went back to college and got a job and started doing ministry. And I think that was the really big turning point,
Yeah, it's pretty cool because I think a lot of what's being said can boil down to even the person who's not. I think in the space of being a PK is still it doesn't change like the title of your family or even the history of your family or what you do or who you are. Like it still is going to boil down to like your relationship with Christ is your relationship. Like your walk and how it all plays out is still between you and God. And I do think that it's really easy, and I think it's really natural for a PK or for pastors' kids to like fall into that trap, as we've kind of said, of like, I'm just gonna do it because I have to, or I'm supposed to. I'm using air quotes if you can't see. It's just like that mindset. But I think if we're being honest, that kind of carries over in anything for any person.
For sure.
And it's really easy to even fall in the trap of, I go to church twice a month, or I've served, or I do this. And it's like sometimes it's we make it more about the doing and the title and the responsibility and less about the things that matter, the actual like time spent with him and the actual like working out your doubts and working out your what is his truth and what does he really say about you and that kind of stuff. And so I think that applies to anyone. I don't think that's 100%. Just a pastor's kid thing. I think if we're all honest, like that's part of this faith journey is that you actually make your faith your own.
100%.
Yeah, and it's all cool because it's the thing I've heard time and time again in my entire life. Like it's all in God's timing. Okay?
Yeah, for sure.
Like I like not trying to brag or anything, but like my dad has been, my parents have both been very good at getting me to understand that from a very early age. So like I don't stress about things, the big things in life, moves, college, what I'm going to do for work. It's all in God's timing. But along with that is people just assume, okay, you're a pastor's kid. You're probably saved pretty early on.
Sure.
Yeah, I remember praying the prayer when I was like 3.
Right.
I prayed it when I was 5, prayed it when I was 7, whatever. I'm not saying you can't get saved when you're that young. Like don't hear me wrong, but like I did not decide to pray that prayer until I was like 15.
Right.
And it's like I know people who were way farther removed from the church who were saved younger than me. It's all in God's timing.
Right.
Like being a pastor's kid doesn't mean jack squat when it comes to your faith in Jesus,
I think on the flip side of like, I think we both were really blessed with some healthy, like, dads who were pastors.
100%.
Because I know our dad was really good at he was Pastor John at church, and then he was dad at home. And I think a lot of pastors and a lot of pastors' kids have the issue where they're a pastor at church and a pastor at home. I don't need you to preach to me at home. I need you to be my dad, And I think that was just something that that was a really helpful thing, so that like for when I was rebelling, right, that I didn't do anything super crazy because he was still being just a dad. He wasn't trying to preach to me. Like he would bring up scripture, but as in not in a sermon to me. It was like, hey, like let's talk about this. Let's talk about what the Bible says about this kind of a thing. So,
yeah, that's so true. Do you guys? I mean, this is like a little mini therapy session at some level, but I think in a lot of ways, like there still was a lot of good that did come. I think I think Brock, you bring up like at least the spiritual side of things. Like maybe we were dealt a better hand than others because we had that experience in the home. But I do also believe like that if how do I want to say this? There is that reality for maybe pastors' kids in general, or those who are in families that are heavily involved in ministry. I think there's something to trusting that it is a good thing, and like it's I don't think anyone's perfect. I don't think anyone's like I would always hope that the intentions of others are not that of wrong intentions and whatnot. And it's always interesting when you meet and you hear those stories of people who've walked away from the church because their families or their parents or their father was in ministry. And it's like, it is just that reminder of like how important the role a father plays in the household. And that's a whole different podcast. But I do think the role of, I think what maybe is going to become the theme of this podcast of like making your faith your own, of like, it's really like, there's something to the example that person can set. And if we're not careful, like I think of that now for, the three of us have kids, and gee, hopefully one day you will have kids, and there's that next step of like, here's the next generation coming up, and we've had examples, and we know the horror stories of pastors' kids and kids in ministry, and we know that, but it's like that reminder of like, we can really set an example, because if we want to or not, and it's even like what we talked about with our life story getting shared in sermons, whether we want to or not, like there is an example that is being made of us, but there's an even more important example that we're setting at home.
Yeah.
And that reality of how there's some pressure that comes with that, but I think there's like a lot of good that can come from it too.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like my dad would have us do the before school, whole family huddles up, reads this Bible story, we pray. Everybody was always like, oh, come on, because like we would always be at church.
Right.
We'd be listening to stuff on Sundays, we'd be listening to stuff during the week on Wednesdays at youth. Like, do we really need it in the mornings at home?
Yeah,
because to us, or at least to me, it just felt repetitive. I was just like, why are we doing this again? And so for me, when I was able to leave home, I mean, by the time I left home, I was mature enough to see why we did all that, and I was grateful for it, but I was still ready, I think, a little bit to get away.
Yeah.
Not stopping going to church on Sundays, but like I went to a Bible college, like I still went to chapel every day, that type of thing. I'm still around it, but I didn't have to do that when I was in my dorm. I didn't have to do that when I was at home. I got married after my sophomore year of college. I didn't have to do that when I was married, because my wife also just didn't see it at the time as a big priority. And we've come to learn over the years, no, this really matters.
Yeah.
We need to pray at home together. We need to read our Bibles together, whether we're reading our own, going through our devotions with each other or separately, whatever. It's important. And what it all came back down to was I realized now I can take what my dad showed us as an example and apply it to my family.
Yeah. And like make it your own. You know?
Yeah, right. I mean, for me, it was it wasn't the repetitiveness, and it wasn't the I didn't have an issue with it. I would say I went through the motions a lot. Like, you know, when he would read us stories or when we would pray, like, you know, obviously on the outside, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. You know, whatever. Not going to complain about it. Well, I will complain about it, but like, you know, I'll be content at the end of it.
Yeah.
And, but I mean, and then afterwards I'm like, okay, whatever, you know, I'll just move on with my day. I mean, it wasn't until like later on in my life, until college, where like, look back at it now, it's like, man, that was like, I'm sad at myself that like I totally blew that off. Like I didn't pay attention, and like I just didn't care, you know. And just because I wanted to satisfy my parents and you know, satisfy everyone around me, instead of, oh, this is gonna set me up for my life with Christ. This is gonna set me up with my walk with Jesus. And it's like, man, so like nowadays I'm like still looking back at like the, you know, the foundational stuff of being a Christian. It's like, oh, okay, so that's okay, you know, I get it now. And it's like, it's just like, if I just, you know, cared a little bit more when I was growing up,
right?
You know, throughout high school, throughout junior high, even when I was growing up as a little kid, like if I just cared a little bit more, you know, like it would have laid a better foundation for sure for my walk. Yeah, but
I think something that's super foundational for me, when I noticed from my father that I'm bringing to my household, besides like those Bible study moments, was authenticity. I think went to Bible college. All four of us went to the same Bible college, so we met. We got the opportunity to meet a lot of other pastors' kids who didn't have the greatest experience, right? And I remember talking to so many kids and so many other pastors' kids, and be like, "Yeah, my dad's a different person on stage than he is at home." And I think that was, so I was like, man, that sucks, because I was very blessed, and we were very blessed to. Dad was the same guy on stage as he was at home. Like the John you got on stage was the John you got at home, or the John you got when he was talking to people or leading small group was the John you got at home. And I think for me it was like, oh, like this is not an act. This is just life. And like to be like, so for me and my son and my wife is, I want how I am in church and on stage and in small groups and in prayer to be the same Jerad that is on stage in prayer in small groups. This is the same Jerad at home. It's the same Jerad as a dad, and the same Jerad as a husband.
That double life.
Yeah, like keeping that one life. And I think that's just like a huge, that speaks to your walk with Christ, like making it your own, but it also speaks to your ability to be the same person, you know, not be two different people.
Yeah. And this may not be a pastor's kid's trait necessarily. I don't know about you guys, but I was so good at conforming my personality to every friend group I care to be around. Like I easily went through 10, 12, 14 different friend groups, all different vibes.
In the same day.
Probably. No,
Same hour.
You never know. No, but it was exactly that. And it's like we like Jerad was saying, we hear about pastors doing that themselves, and then pastors' kids doing that themselves. Guys, you don't have to be a pastor's kid just to know that being the same person around everybody you're around. Yeah. That's enough. You got to do that. And I promise you, if you haven't done that and you're doing that now, or like if you're living the multiple personality life, it is so relieving to break off and just to be yourself.
To be you.
100%. I think that like even like people know you by your actions, you know, like that's so huge. Even like with us as pastors and people in ministry and things like that, like I think it speaks volumes that people will see us in the store and they know that like the person that they're getting is the same person they get at church. And I think that it's like that speaks how authentic your faith is, you know, and how authentic you are as a person. And I think, like you said, it's just so relieving to stop conforming like to different groups and just be who you are and who you're called to be, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So good. I guess my last question is, if you had any beneficial, I'll use that word, beneficial advice to maybe if there's a pastor's kid out there who's listening, or maybe even a pastor themselves who would be listening to this, who has children or, you know, their family, like anything that you're saying, like, hey, this is something to really consider or be aware of, or this would be awesome, or, you know, just advice in general that you think would be beneficial.
I guess for me, it would be, if you're a pastor's kid or a missionary's kid, that's a whole different 3-parter podcast. Maybe we'll get some MKs in here sometime. No, but if you're a pastor's kid, you unfortunately do not have that choice of that label kind of being stuck to you. You can choose how you deal with it. But honestly, just embrace it. I'm not saying go do all the stuff that we experience. I'm not saying go fake your personality. I'm not saying go rebel or whatever. Like, embrace the fact that your dad has been chosen to do something that is God honoring. And at times you may feel like you're along for the ride. Live for it. Because when you run away from that, you may not realize how much you are possibly hindering your own relationship with God. Because I had a Christian household surrounding me at all times, and I didn't want to be a part of that at all times. I don't even want to know how much earlier my relationship with God could have started if I just realized it's okay. It's okay to be where I'm at. It's nobody needs to think of me different.
That's good. Anything, G?
Yeah, kind of a little bit piggybacking off that. Just like I would just embrace it, you know, don't fight it. I mean, if I'm being honest, looking back at, like, you know, for me it was like always choices, like, oh, am I going to go to youth group tonight, or am I going to go hang out with my friends and, you know, do some really bad stuff? And it's like I always chose my friends, you know. I always put something in front of God. And it's like, especially if you're at a young age, or if, like, you know, just like you're not missing out on it. Like, there's nothing you're missing out with your friends. Like looking back at it now, like, it's just like I don't even see those guys anymore, you know. And it's just like I wish I would have just chose God, you know. Like, just say no to, like, you know, if you have the opportunity to go party, you know, if you have the opportunity to go do something that, you know, it's just not right, or it's like just, you know, kind of drifting away from God. It's like, just say no. You're not missing out. Like, I promise you. Like, it might feel like that's your life now, and it's like that feels like that's going to be the highlight of your year, is going to go to this party or just whatever it is. And it's just like, no, it's not. Like, it might matter at the moment, but like 5 years from now, it's like, man, why did I do that? You know, like, why did I choose to do that instead of going to youth group? Why did I choose that instead of going to church on that Sunday? And it's just like, always choose God, you know, like, Like, I know that's like something that's just so hard to hear as a PK, because you're like, we've been talking about it. We're always around it. We're always surrounded by God and Jesus and by pastors, like that's the, one thing you don't want to hear, but it's like, that's the one thing that's going to keep you growing your faith and keep on, keeping, like, strengthening your relationship with Jesus. It's like, just, stick to what's good. Like, you're not missing out, I promise. So just say no, that would be my advice.
It's good.
I think, I keep saying I started with, I think.
I think.
I have three things, like three really quick hitters. I think the first one is a lot of the pressure that you feel is 95% of that's self-imposed. I think a lot of the pressure we feel, like growing up, that people think we should be this way, or our dad thinks we should be this way, or we need to be a pastor, or you need to be this, or need to be that, is self-imposed. So with that, be gentle with yourself. I think that is something that's really huge, is to allow yourself to make mistakes and to be gentle with yourself, but also the second thing is, don't let Jesus become mundane. Like, don't let your walk become mundane. I think because you were a PK, because you're a pastor's kid, we hear Jesus talked about all the time. We hear about our walk with Christ talked about all the time, and we're around it all the time, that we think, oh, we're good. Do not let Jesus become mundane. Make that, like, fresh and new every day. Can you just seek him, make his faith your own? And then two, enjoy it. Like, just enjoy it. Like, you've got you'll have crazy stories. I mean, I've had police officers just pull me over because they recognized me and wanted me to tell my dad hi. And things like that. Just enjoy it. I think it's not as big deal as you think it is. So, yeah.
It's good. Well, sweet. Well, I appreciate you guys being on, and I hope those of you who are listening that this little therapy sesh was beneficial. I do think there's good things that a reality of being a PK is that there has been a lot of fun. There has been a lot of joy that's come from it, and I think that last thought too of just like not letting Christ become mundane. That's like a universal truth for I think a lot of believers, of that reality of really seeking after him. And again, I'm going to hammer back home that theme of making faith your own and really seeing it as a beneficial and in all honesty the most important thing in your life is Jesus. And so I really hope this has been a beneficial conversation to you. And again, we appreciate those of you who listen. Again, you can catch us on all the major platforms, whether it be Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes. Garrett said it earlier in the episode. You can rewind and listen to it again if you need to.
Maybe
also, if you need skis, go check out Garrett.
Go
see
skis.
me for skis. I'll hit you up with a 40% off deal.
But oh my goodness,
Family of Christ deal.
Family of Christ.
Okay, we got to shut the mics off. So, but no, we hope again this is just a midweek pick me up for you, or whenever it is that you listen to the Bayview Podcast. Again, this is Brock, Garrett, Jerad, and Andrew signing off.